Good evening, friends. Today we are going to take a new topic under GST, and that is time of supply of goods and services. Time of supply of goods and services. So this is the topic: time of supply under GST is explained. So before I go into the topic, there is a element of a very important concept, a important what you call rule. The general limit, time limit for rising invoice in case of goods and in case of services. If goods are supplied, are supplied, and if services are also supplied. So what is the time limit within which the invoice towards this supply of goods and supply of services should be done? So let's talk about the time limit for raising the invoice by the supplier, and in case of supply of goods as well as in supply of services. So time limit for raising of invoices under supply of goods is the invoice should be raised before or at the time of removal of goods for supply to the recipient, whether the supply involves movement of goods or delivery of goods or not. Okay, so at the time when the goods are removed from the place by the supplier to the recipient, whether the supply involves movement of goods or not, it is the point, it is the time at which the invoice has to be prepared, invoice has to be raised. Number one. Number two, delivery of goods are making available thereof to the recipient. In any other case, delivery of goods or making available these goods thereof to the recipient in other cases will be the time within which the time at which the invoice has to be raised in case of goods. So this is very important. Okay, removal of goods and delivery of goods is the point or the time at which the invoice has to be raised. That is a condition under GST. Okay, this particular bit of information, please remember, has been taken from the following source. So you for disclosure purpose, I'm disclosing this particular information has been taken from or extracted from the Chartered Accountant Student February 2019, something like that. And this is the website. Now, what about services? So, before or after the provision of services, but within 30 days from the date of supply of services. So if a service has been supplied on, for example, 1/10/2019, so within 30 days we have to prepare a we have to raise the invoice, and in some cases it will be 45 days from the date of supply of services. That is in case of insurance companies providing services of insurance, banking companies, and financial institutions, including NBFCs, which are rendering some specialized, specific, related, business related services. In those cases, 45 days is that is granted. That is from the date of supply. Within 45 days, the concerned invoice has to be raised. So this is very important. Okay. Now our whole discussion uh, will be this. We will ignore for the time being because it's a comprehensive understanding. So time of services under GST explained. Now, why it is important? Why we have to study or understand the rules and the other aspects of time of supply of services or goods. Now, for example, just for an example, if the goods are supplied to the buyer on 1/10/2020, and the payment is made by him by a check on 10/10/2020, and the check is getting cleared and the appropriate amount is created to the bank account of the supplier on 1510 15 10 to the 20. Okay, so in this case, what is the date of supply? Whether it is on 110, that is the date on which the goods are supplied, or the date on which the payment is received in the form of check, and what is this date, that is 1510 2020, which is the date on which this check is cleared and the amount is credited. So which particular date we have to take, either this or this or this, because see, it may so happen that the rate of GST, as it is dynamic and keeps on changing, it may be different at different points of time. So if you are considering this, then it is, for example, 18%. If it is considered this is the time of supply, then it may be 28%. Or if this is the case, that is the time of supply, uh, as you assume, it may be some 16%. So you don't know whether to charge this rate or this rate for because this is the date, this rate because this is the date. What your assumption? But your assumptions can't be taken for granted. So we have to be very clear, like you have to find out the exact time of supply from the rules and regulations provided under the GST Act. That's the reason why this is very, very important. So the tax rates, the exchange rates, exemptions, abatements, all these are changing from time to time. It is thus necessary to know the precise date and time when the charging event takes effect. Charging event is nothing but supply of goods or services. What is the time of supply of goods or services? So hope you have understood why this particular topic is considered to be very, very important from the viewpoint of GST. Now, this is a basic summary of. So please remember at the bottom of the slide, uh, I have given the URL at the source from where this bit of information has been extracted. So standard disclosure, if I forget to mention in every slide, but this particular information has been gathered from different sources which are mentioned at the bottom of the slide, like in this case cleartax.in is the source of this particular information. Okay, so how to determine the time of supply of services? Now we are going to talk about services, because services and the time of supply, we have to time of supply is uh, to be determined. Even for goods, we are going to talk elaboratively about the time of supply. So first, we will take up our discussion on services and time of supply of services. So let's discuss point to point. So time of supply of services. Time of supply of services. The time of supply of services shall be the earlier of the following dates. So you have to remember all this. So there are three different situations. This is one, this is two, and this is three. One, two, and three. The first situation is the first situation is if the invoice is issued within the period prescribed. I told you that the invoice has to be raised by the supplier within the duration of time which is specified. So in case of services, it is within 30 days from the date of provision of services, and in some cases, specific cases like banking, insurance, and not, and other allied. I have shown this one if you remember. So financial institute. In case of insurance companies and banking and financial institutions, uh, we are granted 45 days. Okay. In other cases, it is 30 days within which we have to raise the invoice. That is from the date and time of provision of the services. So if the invoice is raised within the prescribed duration of time, then the earliest of the following: the date of issuing of invoice or the date of receipt of payment. So for example, the day on which this particular service was supposed to be issued, so the receipt for this supply of service has to be raised. For example, it is 110 and they have raised on that day only. So they have fulfilled this particular condition. So the date of invoice will be 1/10/2020, number one, or the payment. If the payment is received on one, for example, 10/10/2020, after 10 days from the rising of the invoice. These two dates have to be compared, and among them, whichever is the earliest one, that is the time of supply of services. When the invoice is raised within the time frame or prescribed period of time as specified in under GST. Now, similarly, if the invoice is not raised within the prescribed period of time, so it may so happen that you were supposed to raise on 1/10/2020, but the supplier of services has not uh, issued or raised the bill or the invoice towards the service rendered. So in this place, he has defaulted or he has violated this rule, and assuming that he has issued that on 10, that particular the invoice was raised on 10/10/2020 in place of 1/10/2010, 2020. Sorry. So in this case, you have to go for not this regulation, this rule, but you have to go for this one. So what is that? The date of provision of service. If the date on which the service has been provided is, so for example, in this case, 15/9/2020, for example, okay. Oh, sorry, it will be, for example, 1/9/2020, because 30 days within which. So this is one, and the date of receipt of payment. So if the date of receipt of payment is, for example, 16/9/2020, then among these two dates, whichever is the earliest, is the time of supply of service. So we are going to take up so many examples, numerical problems as far as time of supply of services are concerned. So this slide gives you a full information about time of supply of services in first condition if the invoice is raised within the prescribed period of time. If invoice is not raised as per the prescribed duration of time. Now, number three, when the provisions of E and B are not applicable. So this provision and this provision are not applicable for N. Okay, in such a case, the date time of supply of services is the date on which the recipient shows the receipt of services in his books of accounts. So if this is not applicable and this condition is not applicable, automatically will come into the third condition, and the third condition is where the provisions of clause A and clause B are not applicable, doesn't apply. The date on which the recipient shows the receipt of service in his books of accounts, okay, before the provision of service or within 30 days after the provision of service as per invoice rules, other than insurance or banking companies or financial institutions. Okay, so within, before the provision of the service or within 30 days after the provision of the service as per the invoice rules. Okay, then again, this is the third condition. So once we take up some examples, at the time we will understand it. Again, this slide is taken extracted from this source, cleartext.in. So let's take example here. If the supplier of taxable services receives an amount up to rupees 1,000 in excess of invoice amount, the time of supply for the extra amount shall be the date of issue of the invoice. Okay. Uh, Number one, clause A and clause B. For clause A and clause B, so this you can have understanding on your own, and when we are doing a small problem, we are going to elaboratively talk about this particular point. Oh, this is very, very important. The previous slides gave you a just a crux of the time of supply, but this particular slide gives you a comprehensive understanding about the condition 1, condition 2, and condition 3. So this is extracted from a website as mentioned here. This is a disclosure. So time of supply of services. So this under forward charges. Now there are two types of charges: reverse charge and reverse charge mechanism, and normal or forward charge. Okay, we have separately dealt on these two topics, and this topic video is uploaded, so you can understand what you mean by reverse charge mechanism and normal charge. Okay, so normal and forward are one and the same. So forward is nothing but the person who is supplying the services or supplying the goods is collecting money from is collecting the value of the supply of services and goods, or goods, sorry, inclusive of a GST, and subsequently he pays the GST to the concerned government department. Okay. So in the other case, the reverse is the reverse is the way the GST is collected, and that is a reverse charge mechanism. Okay, we have a separate understanding about those. So case one, case two, let's talk about very important. Invoice has been issued within the time limit. So then I told you it is date of issue of invoice or date of receipt of payment, and among them, just now we have discussed about this, but we have some points here. That's the reason I have taken up for discussion. Date of issue of invoice. If it is within the time limit within which the invoice has been raised, then the date of issue of invoice, and or compare it with date of receipt of the payment. Okay, and among them whichever is earlier, that is the time of supply, if the condition is that invoice has been raised within the time limit under section 31. Okay, now if invoice is not issued within the time limit, as far as services are concerned, okay, we are talking about services, then the date of provision of service already we spoke about, and the date of payment of receipt of the payment are among these two dates, whichever is the earlier, that is the time of supply. Now, time limit for issue of invoices, in case of already we have spoken 45 days, in other cases it is 30 days. Now let's talk about, uh, see, this is very important, okay, time limit for issue of invoices. That's the reason we have taken up this particular point for discussion. Now, date of receipt of payment, the second point, this particular point, what does it speak? What are the 2 points we have underneath date of receipt of payment? For example, uh, Mr. X has got services supplied from Messrs. ABC. So for this, he is going to make a payment. So date of payment, receipt of payment by Messrs. ABC. What does it mean? It means that there are two likely situations. Date on which the payment is recorded in the books of accounts. Number one. Number two, date on which the payment is credited to the supplier's account. Okay. In this case, the guy has given a check to him for the services rendered by Messrs. ABC Limited of some 1 lakh rupees as the check is given. So ABC Limited accountant entered the receipt of this check amount on 1/10/2020. But what has happened? This check is getting released on 5/10/2020, and there were some 2 holidays in between. And because of time consumption, it took almost 3 days or 4 days to get the check realized, and subsequently the amount getting credited. So he has already entered that in the books of account, the date of receipt of the check or amount is, that is the payment is, the receipt of the payment is as 1/10/2020. But the bank account is being created on 5/10/2020. So in this case, which should be taken, this or this? So it is clearly mentioned here. The date of receipt shall be date on which the payment is recorded in the books of accounts of the owner, or date on which the payment is credited to the supplier's bank account, among them whichever is earlier. Okay, whichever is earlier. So in this case, this will be considered. Or reverse can be the case, like he the bank account was created on 1/10, but the accountant entered the in the books of account this payment as, for example, 6/10. So whichever is early. Okay, so this is note 2. Note 2 is very important. Note 3, note 4 will just for the time being ignore it, but let's see note 4. When the payment is received in installments, the time of supply shall be determined separately for each installment. For example, there is a continuous supply of services. For example, in case of telecommunication services, you give service, the service provider is providing service for 30 days, and on the 31st, on the 1st of next month, he is issuing a bill or invoice. So it is a continuous supply. For example, another example is every 7 days, whatever service has been rendered for this service, the invoice has been raised. So when the payment is received in installments, okay, the time of supply shall be determined separately for each installment. Okay, that's the point. So again, cleartax.in is the is the source of information. Now let's talk about. So in the previous slide we talked about uh, forward charge, normal charge. Now there can be a situation when the goods are supplied under reverse charge mechanism, services are supplied under reverse charge mechanism. So I will give you a small example of reverse charge mechanism. I will give you a small example of reverse charge mechanism. So, for example, agriculturist is supplying cotton to, for example, a listed textile industry. Okay, for example, you can take for example, RSW is a listed company or Arvind Mills is a listed company. So this farmer is supplying uh, to this company some 10 lakh rupees example, okay, 10 lakh rupees of goods. So now this guy will make a payment to this guy of 10 lakh rupees, of 10 lakh rupees. And will now this guy has to give invoice in normal case, normal situation or normal transaction, this guy has to give invoice of 10 lakh rupees plus he has to levy on this one appropriate predetermined or uh, GST amount on this 10 lakh rupees he has to charge, has to collect. So for example, in this case, this particular product attracts 28%. So assuming it is 2 lakhs 80,000. So this guy will collect from this guy 12 lakhs 80,000 rupees, and subsequently he will keep with him, retain with him 10 lakh rupees, and 2 lakhs 80,000 will be paid to GST, towards GST, to the concerned department. Okay. Now, is the agriculturist a appropriate person to collect the tax? Is he a registered person? So generally, a agriculturist is a small person. He doesn't have any registration. Neither he neither he has any invoice to prepare, because he is not doing business. He's a very small businessman. So in this case, this guy has to see that he is uh, paying towards this amount of 10 lakh rupees, whatever is the appropriate GST to the central government. So in this case, what has happened? The purchaser or the recipient of goods or supply, recipient of goods or supply or services, sorry, is paying GST to the department. So in the normal cases, it was collected by the manufacturer or the supplier. In this case, the supplier is not collecting it. It is a recipient of goods or services which is the one which is collecting the GST and paying it to the department. So this is a reverse charge mechanism. Hope you have understood it. If not, then here there is no point in discussing this one, because our particular concept today, what we are going to discuss is time of supply of services. So I have prepared a separate video on reverse charge mechanism. You can view this video, and you can, to my knowledge, to my understanding, you will get a fair amount of understanding about reverse charge mechanism. So in case of reverse charge mechanism, the liability to pay is by the recipient of goods or services instead of the supplier. So already I have discussed. In case of a reverse charge, the time of supply shall be the earliest of the following dates. So in this case, the time of supply shall be the earliest of the following dates. One is the date of payment. So just now we told that he has to pay 10 lakh rupees. So at what date, on what date is paying the money towards those supplies made by the agriculturist? To the date immediately after 60 days from the date of issue of invoice by the supplier. 30 days for goods. So in case of services, it is 60 days. In case of goods, it is 30 days. So again I'm recovering the sentence. The date immediately after 60 days from the date of issue of the invoice by the supplier, and 30 days for goods. If it is not possible to determine the time of supply under ABC, I don't know where C is, but the time of supply shall be the date of entry in the books of accounts of the receiver of the service. So, who is receiving the service in that case? He has entered that he had made a payment to the supplier. That date will be taken into consideration. So, one is the date of payment, the date immediately after 60 days from the date of issue of the invoice by the supplier. So, in this case, the agriculture was the supplier. So, he might have issued a invoice of 10 lakh rupees. So that date on which he has issued the invoice, number two. Number three, if it's not possible to find out from A and B, then go for C. That is, the time of supply shall be the date of entry in the books of accounts of the receiver. In this case, the receiver of the service is the guy who has got the services. So in his books of accounts, uh, he might have entered what is the date of payment. Okay, that will be the time of supply shall be the date of entry in the books of accounts. So among these three, whichever is the if it's not possible to determine, then we will go for this date. So among them, whichever is the earlier, then that will be the time of supply. So for clause A, now let's talk about clause A, date of payment. So already we have spoken about this, the date on which the recipient entered the recipient entered the payment in his books. So in this case, recipient was Tata Motors or Arvind Mills. Okay, sorry, RSWM. Recipient of services, the date on which the recipient entered the payment in his books. So that date, as far as this one is concerned, the date of payment, or the date on which the payment is debited. Now in this case, debited, because he is making the payment of 10 lakh rupees to him. So that date. So among them, whichever is the earliest, that has to be considered. Okay, so this we will just ignore it. Now in this case, reverse charge mechanism, just now I told about this. Date of payment, date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue of the invoice in case of services. In case of goods, it is 30 days. As we are talking about services, which is 60 days. That is the reason why it is highlighted 60 days. If the time of supply cannot be determined as above parameters, then the time is the date of book entry. So date of payment, date of debit entry in the books of accounts of the recipient. So this particular information has been taken from this particular site. So let's take a small example as far as reverse charge mechanism is concerned. So reverse charge mechanism, I told you, the recipient of the goods or services will pay the GST to the concerned GST department. Okay. Date of payment 15th July 2018. Date of invoice 1st July 2018. Date of entry in the books of the receiver 18th July. So in this case, the time of supply of services is 15th May 2018. If for some reason the time of supply could not be determined. Okay. So I already told, in this case you should not look at the invoice. It should be the date of payment and 60 days from the date of issue of invoice. So in this case, if invoice has been issued by the supplier, so plus 60 days. 60 days is equal to 2 months. 2 months means 1st July to 1st August. 1st August is 1 month, and 1st August to 1st September is 2 months. So 1st September is the appropriate date. So 60 days. So 60 days from the date of invoice is one, that is 1st September 2018. So the another date is 15th July, which is the payment date. So among them, whichever is the earliest, which is 15th July. That's the reason it is written as 15th July. However, if for the above reasons, time of supply could not be calculated or determined under under A or B, then you have to go for C. What is C telling? When did we enter into the books of accounts, or when is the amount debited from the bank account? So here bank account, when it is debited in as far as the bank account of the receiver of the service is not given, hence we take, if this particular data is not available, we will take this data. So hope this is also clear. Now, time of supply. This is the main summary sheet of time of supply of services, time of supply of goods, and time of supply of services under reverse charge. So the whole discussion is on this particular slide. The whole discussion what we are going to have will be covering all these aspects. One is time of supply of services under reverse forward charge, that is normal transaction. Time of supply of services under forward charge. Okay, time of supply of services under when the invoice is issued within the specified period of time. When the invoice is not issued within the specified period of time. The third condition is the time of supply of services under reverse charge mechanism. And another one is time of supply in case of vouchers exchangeable for services. Okay, I will not discuss much about this one, but our concentration will be on these three, and we'll already we have discussed about this, and in the subsequent slides we'll be having some numerical problems also on situations. So we have covered about time of supply of services under GST. Now the rules also we spoke about, how to remember the date and other stuff, how to determine the time of supply. Now it's time to take discussion further on time of supply of goods. Time of supply of goods. Let's talk about time of supply of goods. Time of supply of goods. No, time of supply of goods. How to determine the time of supply of goods? This particular slide is being extracted, and the source is from cleartax.in, standard disclosure. How to determine the time of supply of goods? Okay, so till so far we have talked about services. Now let's talk about goods. The time of supply of goods shall be earlier of the following dates: the date of issuing of invoice, or the last date by which the invoice should have been issued. Already I told that the invoice should be issued or raised at the time when the goods are removed for distribution to the recipient or the buyer. Hope you remember this. Okay, I will show you once again the very first slide, which is the most important slide. So this one, as far as goods are concerned, you have to raise the invoice before at the time of removal of goods for the supply to the recipient, where the supply involves movement of goods. Number one. Number two, delivery of goods or making available thereof to the recipient. Removal of goods and delivery of goods. Okay, these are the at the time or before you remove the goods, or at the time or before you the delivery of goods to the recipient. Okay, so this is very important. So let's talk about this. So that was what the point was. So the time of supply of goods shall be the earlier of the following dates, the time of issuing of invoice. So you should remember that the issue of invoice should be an appropriate time as mentioned. The date by which invoice should have been issued. For example, I told you when they are removed at the time of removal or before the time of removal. It can't be after the time of removal, and at the time or before the time of delivery of goods, or the date of receipt of payment, the date of receipt of payment, and among them whichever is earlier is the date of supply of services, is the date of time of supply of services. So this is also clear. Now there are some more points. Now the supply shall be assumed to have been made to the extent it is covered by the invoice. For B, now let's talk about B, the date of receipt of payment. The date of receipt of payment. It has two dates. The date on which the date on which entry in the books in the payment in his books is shown, the date on which the entry has been made in the books of accounts of the supplier of goods, or the date on which the payment is getting credited to the bank account of the supplier. So among them, whichever is earlier. Among them, whichever are earlier. Whichever are earlier. So once you are taking up some problems, at that time life will be very, very easy. Don't worry. Be happy. Next point. Now, the some more information is added to the previous slide. So the type of supply of goods shall be in forward charge, the date of issue of tax invoice, when the tax invoice is issued within the time limit of issue of invoice. That is, I told you, at the time or before time of removal or delivery of goods to the recipient. Last date on which the invoice ought to have been issued when invoice is not issued within the time limit. The date of receipt of payment. So among these three, whichever is earlier. So as far as date of so let's talk about uh, the note one. The note one is time limit for issue of invoice for supply of goods. What is the time limit within which the invoice has to be raised by the supplier of goods? When the supply involves movement of goods, so when the goods are supposed to be transported to the end customer, so where supply involves movement of goods at the time or before the removal of goods. So, for example, Mr. X orders some 1 lakh TVs or laptops to a particular manufacturer. So, this 1 lakh laptops have to be moved from a place one X1, and it has to reach X2, and which are separated by almost 500 kilometers. So these goods will be in these goods. The supply of these goods involve movement of goods from X1 to X2. That is from, for example, Pune to Bangalore, Pune to Bangalore. So these goods are removed at the time of supply of goods, where supply involves movement of goods. So at that time or before the removal of goods, sometimes it can so happen that it can be removed before the uh, delivery of goods. Okay, so this is number at the time of at the time or before the removal of goods for movement. Next one, where the supply doesn't involve movement of goods at the time or before the delivery of goods. For example, Mr. X comes to a showroom and purchases a laptop. So he will take the laptop and he goes to his house. So there is no movement of goods. So in this case, this guy is handing over the laptop and is getting payment towards it. So there is no movement of this particular supply of goods doesn't involve movement of goods. So in this case, the time limit within which the invoice should be raised by the this guy is at the time when the goods at the time when the goods are handed over handed over delivered to Mr. X, or before the delivery of goods. Okay, it can be a situation where before the delivery of goods also the time limit is for the issue of invoice for such kind of supply of goods where there is no movement of goods. Now there can be, I told you, cases where continuous supply of goods are there. Now, in this case, when should be the time limit within which the invoice for supply of goods should be the invoice should be raised for such kind of supply of goods at the time or before the time of issuance of periodical statement. Okay, this is the condition. Note two is this, regarding this one, date of receipt of payment. See, I am very sure that once we are taking up some numerical problems for discussion, at that time all the doubts or elements of queries in your mind will be wiped out, and you will be crystal clear about the concept. Date of receipt of payment shall be the date on which the payment is recorded in the books of accounts of the supplier, or the date on which the payment is created to the, already we have discussed about this. Note 3, note 4, if the payment received is up to rupees 1000 in excess of the invoice, the supplier can choose to take the date of invoice issued with respect to such excess amount of the amount as the time of supply for such excess value. So what it means to say is, if the payment received is up to 1000 rupees, in excess of the invoice amount. In that case, so for example, invoice amount is some 1 lakh rupees, and the payment received is 1 lakh, 1 lakh 200. Okay, so the 200 is the extra amount paid with the recipient of the goods or services. In such a case, the supplier can choose to take the date of invoice issued with respect to such excess amount, which is 200 rupees, as the time of supply of goods for such excess value as the time of supply of. Okay, hope you understood it. When the payment is received in installments, the time of supply shall be determined separately for each installment. Okay, when the payment is received in installment, for example, one guy has supplied some 5 lakh rupees worth of goods, and the payment is received in 10 installments of, for example, 50,000 rupees. So different dates are there. So when the payment is received in installments, the time of supply shall be determined separately for each installment. So these are different dates, different installments. So for each installment, we will separately find out the time of supply. Example. Let's take the example here. As far as determining the time of supply of goods are concerned. So example, date of invoice was 15th May 2018. Date of receipt of payment is 10th July. Date on which the supplier recorded receipt in the books of accounts. So this particular example is the one which is stating that the date on which the invoice was prepared was 15th, and it was supposed to be prepared on 15th on the assumption that the goods are removed for uh, transportation or to the end customer is on 15th, and on the same day it has the when the goods are removed for supply to the end customer, the invoice is prepared. Okay, that is the assumption, and this is the date on which the goods are removed, and the same day the invoice is prepared, so no problem. So one is clear. Date of receipt. So this guy who was supplied who got the goods, who is the recipient of goods, made the payment on 10th July, and this was recorded in the books of accounts of the supplier on 11th July. So among these two, whichever is earlier, first we have to do that. So 13th July, and subsequently we have to find out the earlier of these two, because I told you date of invoice or receipt of a payment. If you look here, date of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. So in this case, among these two, whichever is earlier is 15th May. So 15th May is the date on which this particular transaction is entered, and whatever is the tax rate on this particular date, that will be charged. For example, 10 lakh rupees is the value of the goods which are being supplied on this date, and on this date the concerned amount of GST is 18%. So 10 lakhs into 18%. So hope this is also clear. Now we have discussed so far uh, determine time of supply of services under forward charge, time of supply of services under reverse charge, time of supply of goods under forward charge. Now it's time to determine time of supply of goods under reverse charge. Now I told you one example of reverse charge. So let me give one example. Let me continue the same example. Agriculturist supplies raw material to an factory, some 2 lakh rupees. Now this guy makes a payment to this guy. Now this guy is a very small businessman. He's not registered, and he's not supposed to get registration, and all that conditions are there. In this case, he will not pay 10 lakh rupees plus GST. What he will do, he will just pay 10 lakh rupees, and on this, whatever is the GST amount, that is for example 28%, which amounts to 2 lakh 80,000, he will pay to the concerned department. So this is a case of reverse charge mechanism, where the liability to pay the tax of GST is on the receiver of the goods or the recipient of the goods and services, and not the supplier of goods or services. So let's take the discussion further and find out the time of supply of goods under reverse charge mechanism. Under reverse charge mechanism. So point. Reverse charge mechanism means the liability to pay the tax, that is GST, IGST, SGST, UT, GST, and all that stuff, is by the recipient of the goods or services instead of the supplier. So in this case, we have to find out the time of supply. In case of reverse charge, the time of supply shall be very important one. Don't get confused. The date of receipt of the goods. For example, in this case, agriculturist and the company which was the recipient of cotton. So RSWM Limited, for example, RSWM Limited. So when did this company receive the goods? It will be clearly mentioned in the books of accounts or in the receipt at the gate or the date of payment. Now, when did this guy make the payment? Okay, these two dates will be there. Three, that the date immediately after 30 days from the date of invoice, issue of invoice by the supplier. Now this guy is issuing some invoice of 10 lakh rupees to this guy. So the date immediately after 30 days from the date of issue of invoice. For example, is issuing an invoice date containing a date of 1/10/2020. So 30 days. So 30th October 2020 in case of goods, but in case of services it is 60 days. Please remember that. Now if it is not possible to determine the time of supply of either by A or B or C, then the time of supply shall be the entry in the books of accounts in the so for this I told you there are two conditions: the date on which the recipient entered the payment in the books, the date on which the amount is credited to the bank account. So these three are very important. Among them, whichever is the earliest, that is the time of supply in case of time of supply of goods under reverse charge. Okay, this I will not take because this is already uh, example. Let's take an example in reverse charge mechanism. Date of receipt of goods was 15th May. Date of payment 15th July. Date of invoice issued 1st June. So it is plus 30 days. That is 1st July. Okay, please remember this. Among them, whichever is the earliest. Now, 1st July, 15th July, and 15th May, whichever is earliest. So, 15th May is the date of, time of supply of goods. Now, time has come to take up some numerical problems. We are going to take up some numerical problems, very important. Now, let's take the first numerical problem in determining the time of supply. Let's take the first numerical problem in determining the time of supply. So let's discuss. The first case is date of removal of the goods, the date of invoice, the date when the goods made available to the recipient, and the date of receipt of payment. So there are four different bit of informations which are furnished. Date of removal of goods. So on this day itself, they should have prepared the invoice, which has not done so. And the date when the goods made available to the recipient, and when did he make the payment. So this is number one. So this is the information for 1, 2, 3, and in the next slide let's look for the solution along with the appropriate uh, comments. So in this case, date of removal is given. It is in 1/10/2017. Date of invoice, so you should have prepared on the same date when the goods are removed. Date of goods made available 3rd 10 October 2017. And when did this guy made the payment, the recipient of the goods? He made the payment on 15th 11. So what is the answer? If you look back, you will see the rules and then we will connect our answer. So let's look at the point. So this is the slide which gives the information. The date of issue of tax invoice, when the tax invoice is issued within the time limit. This one, last date on which the invoice ought to be issued. This is number two, date of receipt of payment. Among them, whichever is the earliest. So one is date of issue of invoice. that is date of issue of tax invoice when the invoice is issued within the time limit, last date on which the invoice ought to have been issued, and date of receipt of payment. So among them, whichever is the earliest. So let's look at the answer and the comments. So in this case, the answer is this one, and this is the data. The data was this one. Since invoice is not issued on or before the date of removal of goods, and the payment is received after the date of removal, hence the time of supply is date of removal of goods. Date of removal of goods, okay, and the payment is received after the date of removal. Now, as these goods are not, as the invoice is not issued at the time of removal, okay, this is number one. Number two, the payment is received after the date of removal. So in this case, the payment is received after the removal. So in this case, the time of supply of the time of supply is the time of removal of goods. Okay, so this one. So just remember, whenever there are a situation like this, among them, whichever is the earliest. Now, look at this. Date of removal 3/10/2017. Invoice prepared. The invoice was prepared on 1/10. So this is a case where the invoice was issued before time. So no problem. So this date, number one. Number two, is when is the date of payment received? The payment was received on 25/11/2017. Among them, whichever is the earliest. So hope this is also clear. So date of preparation of the invoice, or the date on which invoice was raised, number one. Number two is date of receipt of the payment, and in this case there is only one date of payment is given, so that we will consider. Among them, whichever is lowest earliest, sorry, this will be considered. So time of supply is the date of issuance of the invoice, since invoice is issued prior to the date of removal of goods, and the payment is received after the date of invoice. Now let's look at the fourth condition. Third particular numerical third particular instance. The date of removal was 4. The date of invoice was also 4. So it was on the same day the invoice was prepared. This is irrelevant. When was the payment? 1/10/2017. So as I told, if the date of invoice is accurately done, if the invoice is prepared on the accurately on the set date as required, then compare the date of invoice with the date of payment. Among them, whichever is earliest. So the earliest is the payment. So this is a case of advance receipt of payment. Advance receipt of payment for the goods supplied. So in this case, the advance payment date should be taken into account. So time of supply is the date of receipt of the payment, since invoice is issued after the date of receipt of the payment. So among them, whichever is the earliest, that is the way we can consider. So numerical number two. Numerical number two. Let's take numerical number two. There are three datas which are given: invoice date, removal date, and receipt of payment. Receipt of payment. So invoice date. In the first case, invoice should be prepared on this date, but he has not done so. This is a wrong thing he has done, and he has prepared after almost uh, 19 days from the date of removal of goods. So this is number one. Number two, when did he receive the payment? He received the payment on 20/11/2017. Let's look at the answer. So invoice was prepared on this date, but the goods were removed almost 15 days or 20 days prior to the preparation of the invoice. So and he received the money towards this goods removed or invoice prepared on 20/11/2017. So in this case, you should have prepared the invoice on this date. So you was supposed to prepare the invoice on 26/11/10/2017. So compare this one with the date of payment of receipt, date of receipt of payment. So in this case, whichever is the earliest. So the earliest one is 26/10/2017. So time of supply is the date of removal of the goods. Since the invoice is not issued before the removal of goods and payment is received after the removal of goods, so time of supply is date of removal of the goods. Just for understanding, whichever is the earliest among the three. So look here, whichever is the earliest. So the earliest is this one, so automatically this one will be the answer. So let's consider our discussion. Invoice date was 26/10/2017, but the goods were removed on 30/10/2017. So goods are invoice is prepared from before the removal of goods. So invoice date is one date which you have to take, and date of receipt of the payment. So payment is date of receipt of the payment on 5th October. Among them, whichever is earlier. So this is earlier. Time of supply is the date of invoice, since the date is issued, since the same is issued before the removal of goods, and the date payment date is after the date of invoice. So this particular information or numerical problem is taken from a website as mentioned in the bottom at the bottom of the slide. So standard disclosure. Let's take one more numerical example. So just pay attention to this numerical uh, example. So in this case, we have two examples. Let's solve the problem and find out time of supply of time of supply. I don't know. Yes, it is a goods. In case supply of in this case supply involves movement of goods. So when supply involves movement of goods, then it should be uh, as we have seen. Okay, let's take the example. Invoice date is 10/11/2017. Invoice due date 20/11/2017. Invoice date was 10/11/2017. Invoice due date was 10/20/11/2017. Payment 28, and payment entered in the books of accounts of the supplier 28, and the account was credited. The bank account of the supplier was credited as far as the payment is concerned was 30/10/2017. So among them, whichever is the earliest, first we have to calculate that. That is 30/10/2017. So invoice date and invoice due date. So this doesn't make any difference, because invoice is, if it is prepared in advance, then advance date has to be taken into account. So 10/11/2017. Now 10/11/2017 has to be compared with this date, and among them whichever is the earliest. So the time of supply is 10/11/2017. Now let's look at the second case and try to solve that problem and find out time of supply of service, time of supply of goods. Sorry. In this case, the invoice date is 30/11. Invoice due date was 18/11. So he should have prepared on this one, and he has prepared on this one. So we have to take this one, and the payment was entered in the books of accounts on 10/11. So this we have to take first, and this has to be compared with this one. These two have to be compared, and among them whichever is the earliest. So it was 10/11/2017. So now this has to be compared with this one, whichever is the earliest, and this is the earliest. Hope you have understood. If you not, I will explain once again. Just pay attention. So just if you look at this, whichever is the earliest in all these four situations, whichever is the earliest. For example, you should have prepared invoice date was 30/11. He should have prepared invoice on 18/11. So this has to be disregarded. So that means the goods are supplied on this date, where the goods involve movement of goods, where the supply involved movement of goods. So 18/11 is the due date for preparing the invoice or raising the invoice. When did the payment was done? The payment was done before the movement of goods, or the goods were supplied. So this was in advance. Okay. And when did he enter into the books of accounts on this date? When was the amount created? 28/11. Okay, so among them, whichever is the earliest is the date of payment, date of receipt, receive, date of payment receipt. So 1011. So this 1011 has to compare with 1811. Among them, whichever is the earliest is 1011 2017. Hope you have understood this. So again, there is a situation where there is this is a case of reverse charge mechanism. So we are trying to solve the problem under the condition of reverse charge mechanism, and let's solve them. Date of invoice. Date of invoice is 1/10/2017. Date of receipt of goods is 5/10/2017. Date of payment of date of payment in books 10/10/2017. Date when the payment debited in bank account of the supplier, sorry, recipient of goods is 12/10/2017. So let's calculate. Let's calculate. Okay, so the invoice date is uh, 1/10/2017. So it is not given here. uh, okay, from this date we can add 60 days. So that is 110, 111, 112, 112, 112 2017 compared with uh, these two, whichever is the earliest. Whichever is the earliest. Sorry, you have to compare this one with the date of receipt of the goods. Okay, if we will go back to our slide, which consists of the data of a reverse charge mechanism. Okay, so reverse charge mechanism, date of receipt of goods, okay, date of payment, and date of invoice plus 60 days. To this date of invoice, 60 days can be added because it is the date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue of the invoice. Okay, so among them, whichever is the earliest. So let's solve by taking into account that particular rule. So in this case, let's look at the solution. So date of receipt of goods, number one, two is among these whichever is earliest, which is 10/10. So this you got, and add to this one 60 days. You will get 112. So among these three, which is 112, 5/10, and 10/10, whichever is the earliest. So 5/10 is the earliest. So you got 5/10. Now date of invoice is 110. So up to 60 days, you have to calculate plus 60 days, which is 112. Date of receipt of goods 1511. So this is number two. Number three, among this, whichever is the earliest. So 10/10 is the earliest. So 10/10, 10/10 compared with 5/15/10 compared with this one. So date, time of supply is date of payment in the book. So look here. Okay, so again I'm telling you a very important one. My annotations are not working, but my voice is loud and clear. See here, you have to add plus 60 days, which is 1/12 2017. 12, this is 12, 1/12 2017. So you got one date. This is the date of receipt of the goods. This is second date. Now among them, whichever is the earliest. So in this case, the earliest is 10/10. Now this date, 10/10 another date, and 1/12 another date. Among them, whichever is the earliest. So 10/10 is the earliest. What is 10/10? Date of payment in the books. Date of payment in the books of the recipient of the goods. So that is the time of supply. Date of payment in the books. Next one. Third situation. 1/10/2017 is the date of invoice. 15/10/2017 is the date of receipt of goods. Payment is on 12/10, and date when amount is debited to the bank account. So four things are there. So to this we have to add 60 days, which is 1/12/2017. Then compare with this one, 1 2, 1 you got, 2 you got, 3. Among them, whichever is the earliest. Among these two, that is payment recorded in the books of accounts of the recipient, and date of payment, date when the payment debited to the recipient of the goods. So among them, whichever is the earliest, which is 1010. 1010 has to be compared with 1510. It has to be compared with 112. So 1, 2, and 3. Let's compare. So this is the earliest. So date of payment, when the payment is debited to the recipient of the goods. Hope this is also clear. Number four situation. Number four. Number four is date of invoice 110. So granted up to 112 2017. Date of receipt of goods 1511. Number two. This is number two. 1, 2. Date of payment versus date of payment recorded in the books versus date of payment debited to the books bank account. Whichever is earliest. That is 1811 2017. So among them, whichever is the earliest. So 1811, 18th November, 15th November, and 1st December. Which is the earliest? This one is the earliest. Let's see whether I am correct or not. Uh, Time of supply is the date immediately following 30 days from the date of issue of invoice by the supplier. Okay, sorry. Okay, for in case of goods, it is 30 days. So 30 days is, sorry, all the time I was telling 60 days. You have to consider only 30 days from the date of issue of the uh, 30 days. Okay. In case of services, it is 60 days, but in case of goods we have to take only 30 days. So small correction. Okay, you can see here, for services it is 60 days, and in case of goods it is 30 days. Okay, small correction, please take a note of it. So in this case, where is the problem? Okay, so in this case it is 111. So 111, 1511, and 1811, whichever is the earliest. So 111 is the earliest. This is the earliest. So date of invoice. So time of supply is the date immediately following 30 days from the date of issue of invoice. That is 1/11/2017. Hope you are clear. So again, shall I explain this one? Okay. So in this case, in case of goods, the invoice from the date of invoice, 30 days are granted. So it is on 1/11. In case of services, it is, remember, it is 60 days are allowed. So date of receipt of goods 1511. This is number two. In this case, when it is entered in the books of accounts, and when it is the amount is debited to the bank account of the recipient, whichever is earlier. So 1811. So 1811, 1511, and 111. Among them, whichever is earlier. So 111. Sorry. What is in 111? 30 days from the date of issue of the invoice by the supplier. So this is number fourth problem which you have completed. Now let's talk about the fifth problem. So different situations, different answers. From the following information, determine the supply, if the supply is taxed under reverse charge mechanism. Okay, reverse charge mechanism. So reverse charge mechanism goods. So plus 30 days you have to remember for goods, and for case of services plus 60 days. Okay, very important one. Date of issue of issue of invoice by the supplier. So from that date plus 30 days will be 1/1/2018 in all the three cases. Okay, 1, 2, because the date of invoice issued by the supplier is the same in all the three. Removal of goods. So 1/1. Please remember this is 1/1/2018. Removal of goods 31st December 2017. This is number two. Receipt of goods is 21/2018. So what was the rule? Let's look at the rule. Very important. We can't just ignore it. Receipt of the goods. This is not removal of the goods. So you don't get confused. So receipt of the goods, not removal of goods. So you just ignore this one. So receipt of the goods has to be the second criteria which you have to take for comparison. And among these two, whichever is the earliest. That is, when was the amount entered in the books of accounts, and when was the amount debited to the bank account, whichever is earliest. So this you have to disregard. Just remember. So earliest of 1/1/2018, 1/1/2018 compared with 21/2018. Now let's talk about this one. Whichever is the earliest is 31 2018. So 1 2018, 21 2018, and 31 2018. Whichever is earliest is 1 2018 to my understanding. So, so let's look at the answer. Uh, the answer is here he has taken date of payment is uh, earlier. Okay, here what has happened is the receipt of goods is on this one and date of entry in. Okay, uh, earlier of receipt of goods, earlier of receipt of goods, that is receipt of goods is this one, and date of payment by the recipient, by the recipient. Date of date on which the amount was received was uh, 1 to 2018. Not sure about this particular thing. 31/12/2018, 30 days. 30 days will be, sorry, this is, so, okay, I have made a small mistake. Here, 31st 12 2017 plus 30 days is not 1 2017. It is 31 2018. Okay, 31 1 2000. So extremely sorry. Extreme. So you need to be very, very careful. So here, receipt of goods is 21 2018. Among them, whichever is earliest is 31 2018, and this 31 2018. This has to be compared with this one and compared with this one. So this is the earliest. So 21 2018. Very good. Got the answer. Number two, 31 2018 compared with 21 2018 compared with the compared with, sorry, compared with the these two dates, whichever is the earliest. So in this case the date is 5/1 2018. So 31 2018 compared with 21 2018 compared with 5/1. So 5/1. Next case, 31 2017, that is 31 2018 is 30 days. This you have to discard, and receipt of the goods is on 5th March 2018. So among these two dates, whichever is earliest, because we don't have any information of these two, so 31 2018 will be the date of sorry, time of supply of goods. That is the date. So hope you understood this one. Now let's take some more examples. So let's take some more examples. Let's take some more examples. So this is clear. Now, one more numerical problem on the time of supply. So this is a case of services. Okay, so this is a different story all put together. So let's look at the solution. So date of provision of, and this is under normal or forward charge. Okay, so forward charge. Date of provision of service is 10/11/2017. Date of issue of the invoice is the 30/11. So from the date of invoice, you can take 30 days. Okay, if you remember, uh, from the date of provision of services, 30 days can be taken for the preparation of the invoice. So the invoice is issued within 30 days. Okay, very important one. Please remember, I will just recover that point. This was the date on which the services were provided. So the invoice should be prepared 30 days within the provision of services. So that is around 9/12/2017. So within 9/12/2017, the invoice was prepared. Now, date of receipt of a payment. This was the date. So in this case, as the invoice is prepared within the set duration of time, so the date of invoice preparation and date of receipt of payment, and whichever is early. So this is the early. So in this case also, the provision of service was done. The invoice was prepared within the stipulated period of 30 days. So 30/11/2017 versus this one, whichever is the earliest. So 15/11 will be the earliest. Invoice issued within time limit. So 15/11. Because among these two dates, whichever is the earliest. So hope this is also clear. I will not go into this. I will just disregard it. So this is another particular example. So hope you got a clear understanding about different situations, what to be done. So hope this session was fruitful to you. And if you have any doubts as such, you can get back to me on my email ID uh, or my WhatsApp, and certainly I will be looking forward to any doubts as such, and hope I will be able to be of immense help to you. Thank you so much, and bye.